Hi everyone. Welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. This recording conceals an upsetting mystery. The couple cheering in the stands is Celeste and Stephen Beard. They're going to the secondary school graduation of their twin little girls, Jennifer and Christina. Presently, check the lady out sitting alone before them. She is Tracy Tarleton. From an external perspective, she looks supportive of the twins, applauding as they stroll across the stage. In any case, what the young ladies don't have the foggiest idea is that only a couple of months before this recording was taken, Tracy was set free from a mental office also, has been meeting with their mom's secret plotting a violent wrongdoing that will drive the two teenagers to run for their lives. She's very scary. There wasn't enough locks on the door for the two of us to feel safe. We were scared to death. We thought she'd kill the girls. It's 1993. 13-year-old Christina lives with her mom Celeste and her stepdad Stephen in Austin, Texas, while Jennifer, Christina's identical twin sister, lives with their biological father Craig in Washington State. The twins' parents went through a lengthy custody battle after their divorce, which ended in the twins being separated between both parents. Living hundreds of miles away from each other was difficult for the girls because they were each other's best friends. I missed her a lot. I missed Jen a whole lot. We were built-in friends with each other. I would not know how to be a regular sibling. It's always been nice to have someone that knows exactly what I'm going through. It was definitely hard not to have my other half. It's July 1996. After 3 years of living apart, the twins have finally planned a summer trip together, reuniting at their grandparents' house in California. They're really excited because it's the first time they have seen each other in over 2 years. My sister and I never skipped a beat, laughing so hard that we were crying, and I just couldn't believe that we were actually back together again. However, things take a turn for the worse when Jennifer tries to call their father Craig to let him know they've arrived safely, but no one is picking up the phone. They keep trying to call, but still no answer. After 2 days of not talking, the twins receive the news that their father has been found dead in his home, leaving behind a handwritten letter. He had been quietly struggling for years, leaving his daughters asking themselves why he would do this. I felt like I died that day. The twins are in a state of shock. What was supposed to be only a 2-week reunion turned into Jennifer suddenly moving in with Christina, Celeste, and their new stepdad, Stephen Beard, in Austin, Texas. At first, she had a hard time adjusting to the change, but when she met Steve Beard, her new stepdad, he was surprisingly very welcoming and loving, showing a lot of attention to his new stepdaughter. After years of living together, the new blended family from the outside appears to be living a happy life. When I first met Steve, he was just so sweet, which was a relief, because he was technically my stepdad. On Sundays, it was really special because Steve and I would always go to breakfast together. I was very grateful to have his relationship. The sisters have just started their senior year of high school, and they, for once, have a stable father figure. Stephen even formally adopted the twins, giving them each a special family ring. He had always wore his. He just gave it to us after he adopted us, and we thought it was the coolest thing. I was definitely moved that he had this special ring made. Just the adoption alone, I felt pretty connected to him. But everything changes on October 2nd, 1999. At 2:30 a.m., Jennifer is staying with her boyfriend while back at Stephen's house. Christina is asleep like any other night, when all of a sudden, Christina's bedroom door swings open. The lights turn on, and my mom is running through the door saying, "Someone's at the door." I'm like, what is going on here? I jump out of bed because she's in a panic, and I'm on my way to that front door when I see these white flashing lights. Christina is in a state of shock, not knowing who is outside or what they want, so she runs to the phone and calls 911 in a panic. The girl tells them that there is someone banging on their front door, and sirens are blaring outside, with lights flashing all around their home. The 911 operator tells Christina that the people outside are the police. Moments earlier, the dispatchers received this 911 call from someone else inside the house. What is going on there? I'm in bed. I had to pee. I had to pee. Okay. Are you there by yourself? My wife is somewhere in the house. I can't find her. Christina rushes to the front door to let the police inside. Open the front door and it's cops. And they're like, "Is your dad home?" And I said, "Yeah, he's upstairs." Christina hurries to her stepfather's bedroom with the police as her mother frantically runs behind them. The paramedics, they were already working on Steve by the time I, myself, and the police officer got into the room. This was a man who needed immediate medical attention, and they needed to act quickly if he was going to survive. The paramedics try to stabilize Steve, but he's losing a lot of blood. While they scramble to transport him to the hospital as quickly as possible, one of the police officers makes a shocking discovery: a shotgun shell on the ground next to his bed. I'm like, "What? Are you telling me he was shot?" And they said, "Yes." And I just couldn't believe it. Christina calls her sister and tells her what is happening as Steve is airlifted to the nearest hospital. Just couldn't believe what he just said. I'm panicked. I'm definitely panicked. Back at the Beard household, the crime scene is blocked off as investigators conduct their initial walkthrough. It seems like someone went through a side door, which was left unlocked, and went up to Steve's bedroom to fatally shoot him. But before they can start investigating their theory, they need to take DNA of swabs of everything, including all family members who could have been in the house at the time of the crime. Christina, Jennifer, and their mom, Celeste. So at that point, I'm shocked that, first off, Steve had been shot, but I wouldn't have even thought who could have done it. I was wondering if it was a burglar or random, but as soon as we walked out of the house, Celeste whispers to me, "If the police ask you who might have done this, don't mention Tracy's name." Why would Celeste say don't mention Tracy's name? Tracy Tarleton. 6 months before the night of the attack, Celeste met 45-year-old Tracy. She was the manager of a local bookstore in Austin and had recently become close friends with Celeste. She would often get invited by the twins' mom for dinner and birthday parties and even attended their high school graduation. They had this weird friendship. I just remember thinking that this lady wants more from our mom than just a platonic relationship. The twins are on their way to the hospital as they try to understand what's happening. They are confused because they were told by their mother not to mention Tracy, but that only raises suspicions in their mind. I was thinking maybe she's protecting Tracy because she thought it was Tracy. After getting to the hospital and talking to the detectives, they asked me who do I believe shot my father. And I said, my mom doesn't want me to mention this, but I'm not supposed to say Tracy Tarleton. Tracy Tarleton is investigated and her closeness to the Beard family makes her the prime suspect. But something is off. Without any clear motive, detectives have suspicions that someone else is involved. There was no reason for Tracy to do this completely on her own. Police quickly obtained a search warrant for Tracy Tarleton's house based on compelling evidence. A 20-gauge shotgun shell, the very bullet that had wounded Stephen Beard. They then proceeded to Tracy Tarleton's home and knock on her front door. Ms. Tarleton was asked if she owned a shotgun. She said, yes. I asked if I could see it. She thought for a few minutes and she said, okay, you can see it. She gave us a Franchi 20-gauge shotgun. Had her name inscribed on the weapon itself. Law enforcement take possession of the shotgun, bringing it in for further analysis. Days go by and everyone is left waiting for news from the investigators until finally the detectives have the results. And that shotgun turns out to be the shotgun from which the bullet that injured Mr. Beard was fired from. October 8, 1999. 5 days after the shooting of Stephen Beard, Tracy Tarleton is arrested and charged with attempted murder, but investigators are not satisfied. Tracy is refusing to talk about why she did this, and they know there's more to this story than they have so far. Detectives continue to ask questions because they believe Tracy did not act alone, and there might be someone else responsible who currently walks free, but she remains completely silent. Meanwhile, Stephen is in the hospital, and after a painful few months of fighting with the twins by his side, Steve passes away from his injuries related to the shooting. We loved Steve. He never wanted us to worry about anything. He just wanted us to be loved and enjoy our lives. Coming from Washington State, losing my father, he filled that role for me that I'll never forget. As the sisters try to cope with their father's death, they're only left with pain and more questions than ever. Why would someone want to hurt him? Their mother? Celeste? tries to be there for them, and goes with the girls to prepare for the funeral and buy a casket for him. But the twins never expected what would happen next. A lot of crying's going on. We just lost a loved one, and while we were there, she purchased 2 pink caskets for Jen and I, and she's like, I'm gonna get these for you guys. The confusing part to me was Celeste suggesting that 18-year-olds needed to pick out a casket, and in the back of my mind I thought, am I going in this casket soon? Local newspapers and television networks start publishing the story, and everyone starts to worry that the real killer might still be walking free. But without any concrete evidence, the investigators are at a standstill. In the midst of it all, the twins notice their mom's behavior is becoming increasingly disturbing and erratic. We're all crying, and Celeste is just laughing. She kind of had like these crazy eyes, kind of manic, very loud and emotional, but didn't really seem real. But things reach a breaking point on February 16th, 2000, when no one could imagine what was in store for 2 young twins. She then said, hey, why don't we all kill ourselves? And all of a sudden, she pulls out a knife. She's holding it like this, and she goes to kind of lunge. She just stabs herself in the leg. Blood starts gushing everywhere. I was just like, what is happening? The twins call 911 in a panic, begging for immediate medical attention for their mom. As the ambulance arrives, the paramedics rush to start working on Celeste, attempting to stop the bleeding from her leg. The girls are in a state of shock, as their mom is quickly brought into an ambulance and driven to the closest hospital. Over the next weeks, while still in the hospital, Celeste continuously calls both sisters, becoming more and more unhinged and disturbing. And she's yelling and screaming at me over the phone. Would go from normal to screaming back to normal. That's when Christina has an idea that will later give investigators the evidence they need to finally uncover Steve Beard's real murderer. That I thought, hey, you know what? I'm gonna start recording her conversations because I want to play them back to her. And she'll then hear, like, from my perspective, what I'm hearing, and think, oh, that's awful. I can't believe I do that. But then, just as Christina is about to stop recording, Celeste exposes a crucial piece of evidence that will change the investigation forever. She says, I hired somebody to kill Tracy. I froze. It made it all real, and it made it all unsafe. The twins are terrified, realizing that the pink coffins she bought, the recurring bizarre and violent outbursts, the suspicious death of their father, and now her murder plot for Tracy, are all leading to one thing. They will be next on her list. Hearing that sealed it for me. Like any sort of doubt that I ever had that Celeste was involved with our father's murder, I don't have any more. And things get worse from here on. Their mom has been released from the hospital, and now the twins are in more danger than ever. At that moment, Jennifer and Christina's last chance to survive is to go into hiding and make sure their mom can't find them. I cleared out my bank account for Christina and I to go on the run and not have any trace. We stayed in motels. Everything we did with cash. Celeste was trying to find us every day, trying to find us. All I kept replaying in my head was, we are in danger. It was definitely terrifying. Like, we're not coming home from this. As Celeste is on the hunt for her daughters, the twins, armed with the taped conversations of their mother's threats, go to the police to obtain a family violence protective order, which is granted. However, their suspicions of their mother's involvement in their stepdad's death can only be confirmed by one person, Tracy Tarleton. This whole entire time, Tracy was keeping her silence, that she acted in this alone. Tracy, who was in prison awaiting a trial for her role in Steve's murder, kept silent until March 2002 when she reads that the twins received a family violence protective order against their mother in the newspaper. In that moment, she breaks her silence and decides to cooperate with investigators, revealing to detectives the truth behind her motive, what investigators have been waiting to hear since the night of the murder, that she did not kill Steve on her own. But in fact, it was Celeste's plan all along. Now, with Tracy's crucial statement and the twins' incriminating audio recordings, investigators finally have enough evidence to arrest Celeste for capital murder on March 28, 2002. However, just because Celeste is arrested doesn't mean a jury will find her guilty. I felt like if she doesn't go to jail, I was going to be living underground forever, and I wasn't going to feel safe until she was in jail. With her on the street, nobody's safe. The twins begin to work with prosecutors, lawyers, and Tracy Tarleton, the woman who pulled the trigger, to take down their mother and ensure she never gets out of prison. February 3, 2003, the trial begins of Celeste Beard. In front of their own mother, the sisters need to take the stand. I felt like I don't want to be in the same room with her. I was afraid, oh my gosh, how do I stay strong enough to not waver? Worst thing I've ever had to do in my life is see Celeste staring back at me when I had to sit on the stand and testify to everything that I knew she did. I was conflicted because she's my mom, but I just wanted to make sure that Steve got justice. The twins described that throughout all their lives, their mom has had severe mental health problems causing violent outbursts and an overall traumatizing childhood. Growing up, her emotions were all over the place. There was a lot of yelling and screaming and nasty phone calls. Seemed normal to us. Jennifer reveals that when Celeste married 69-year-old retired TV executive and multimillionaire Steve Beard, it wasn't out of love, but it was to gain access to his large inheritance. Did his family ever talk to you about her feelings about Steve Beard? Well, she said that she married Steve for money. Did she tell you about what would happen if Steve Beard died? That she would get it all. She would say, why wouldn't he die already? Did it appear that she was looking forward to that, or, yes? Investigators uncover that after only 6 months of marriage, Celeste had spent over $500,000 of her husband's money, secretly buying all kinds of clothes, jewelry, and artwork. The twins even noticed that Celeste had put sleeping pills in Steve's food on multiple occasions, and once he fell asleep, she would sneak out of the house. In February 1999, 8 months before Stephen Beard's murder, Celeste also had a psychotic breakdown, taking a gun, pointing it at her own head and threatening Christina's life. Because of that incident, she had to be forcibly checked into the St. David's Psychiatric Mental Hospital in Austin, Texas. And while staying at that psychiatric facility, that's when Celeste met Tracy Tarleton. Their mother quickly started to show her a lot of attention, spending time with her, and ultimately developing a close, intimate relationship. After building all that trust, Celeste's real plan can be put into action. She could now manipulate Tracy. She expressed to me that she wanted a sexual relationship with me, which I also wanted. Celeste had been setting up Tracy, saying, Steve is abusive to me. He's so horrible. And Tracy believed that Celeste was really in trouble. Celeste Beard, I don't think ever loved, maybe didn't even like Tracy Tarleton. But she was willing to engage in a lesbian relationship in order to get what she wanted. I just saw this woman that I love in a desperate situation, trying to find a way to survive this meeting that was so awful. Celeste said to Tracy, I cannot live any longer with this abusive husband. But Steve wasn't abusive. That's when, in front of the twins and the jury, Tracy described Celeste's plan for the murder of her husband. She says, oh man, he's gonna die soon, but not soon enough. She had a plan, and she wanted me to shoot him with my shotgun. So we were to enter the grounds, we were to park, and then we'd walk through how I would exit my car, where I would enter the house, how I would approach the bedroom. I walked in at the end of the building, I saw him, and I pulled up and I shot him. You shot him once? I shot him once. The courtroom stays quiet after the shocking revelation. Celeste coldly watches Tracy on the stand, shaking her head, but her smile disappears when her own daughters walk up to the front of the courtroom, repeating pieces of evidence they have. The audio recording of her murder plot against Tracy, as well as her constant threats to the girls. On the tapes, she was histrionic. It was difficult to think that any mother would talk to a child that way. The trial went on for weeks until on March 19, 2003, after deliberating for 3 days, the jurors finally come back with their answer. This will finally determine if Celeste will remain in prison for the murder of her husband, or if she will walk free to forever haunt the twins for their whole lives. Before we bring the jury out, if there is anyone in the courtroom who feels that they may have an emotional outburst, I would ask that you please leave the courtroom at this time. Ms. Johns, would you please stand? Truly, we've been waiting for this for 3 years now. And so, yeah, it's very emotional. And you can't really know what 12 people that you've never met what they're going to do. Madam Foreperson, please read the entirety. State versus Celeste Spirit Johnson. Verdict of the jury. Verdict 4-1 capital murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Celeste Spirit Johnson, guilty of the offense of capital murder. Well, I had a flood of emotions. I wasn't expecting to get so worked up. She is our mom. And it's just like, she's going to jail for the rest of her life. Finally, the sisters get justice for their father's murder. And to conclude the trial, Christina bravely takes the stand once more, but this time to directly speak to her mother and put an end to the fear she has been living with for over 2 years. What did I ever do to you except love you? And this is how you treated us like trash. You say we turned on you? Well, you turned on us. You turned on the whole Beard family. He let you into his home, loved you, honored, obeyed you, and you violated him and murdered him. You are guilty. Shame on you. Celeste Beard is sentenced to 2 consecutive 40-year prison terms, and she won't have the possibility of parole until she's 79 years old. The twins can finally breathe a sigh of relief, as now they don't need to stay in hiding. They can live their lives to the fullest. After court is adjourned, Tracy asks to meet with the twins and apologizes to them directly for the pain she has caused the sisters. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, is sit in a room with the person that actually pulled the trigger. She said that she felt really guilty for killing our father and that she was really sorry. I remember that. She thought she was agreeing to kill an evil man. I feel really bad for her. I could really relate with the fact that she was a victim here too. Twins say that for them, this sincere moment of forgiveness helped them begin their long process of healing. Now, 20 years after the trial, their sisterly bond only became stronger. I have Christina. Christina is my strength. We don't live close to each other, but any chance we can get to go visit each other, we will. The twins are now 42 years old. Jennifer has a good job, which she enjoys and spends her time focusing on her mental health. Christina got married and is a loving mother of 2 children. She is proud to give her kids the life, attention, love, and nurturing she never received growing up. Being the mom that I wanted. They get to do life like I wish I got to. Celeste never expected that her downfall would come from her own daughters. And even though it took years for Jennifer and Christina to heal from the wounds created by their mom, they show that their love for each other is stronger than their mother's hatred. Carrying on with their best lives, getting to know each other with their caring families, is their best revenge. They're undeniable evidence that even after misfortune, there's a life worth living. What do you think of this case? Story 2. Now, we're going to take a look at another horrible case. The story of a British woman named Dina Thompson, nicknamed the Black Widow, became in the mid-20s one of the main topics for numerous documentaries, TV shows, and crime programs. This pleasant, at first glance woman turned out to be a pathological liar and fraudster, leading at least one man who loved her wholeheartedly to the grave. Dina repeatedly managed to escape punishment, but in 2003, she was still in the dock, despite facing life imprisonment. The court was surprisingly mild, allowing parole. So, in 2022, one of the most dangerous criminals, who miraculously survived her ex-husband, characterized as pure evil, went free. Thompson's victims were always men, which, according to experts, may indicate some kind of trauma received by the criminal in childhood or adolescence. However, Dina's early years were quite prosperous. The girl was born in 1960 in North London and brought up in a full family. Her parents lived modestly, but did everything to ensure that their daughter did not need anything. The head of the family worked as a prison guard, seriously engaged in sports, and from childhood motivated Dina to attend gyms where she diligently engaged in gymnastics. In addition, the man often participated in all kinds of sports competitions, including those held in other countries, and constantly took his daughter with him. Dina grew up as a quite active, cheerful, and sociable child. She easily made acquaintances and friendships with peers, and, with age, learned to quickly win the attention of guys she liked. After school, the girl went to college and then got a job in one of the local banks. At the age of 22 years, Dina met her future first spouse, Lee Wyatt. They first met thanks to the cousin of the guy who organized a couple blind date. Between the young people immediately burst feelings, and a stormy romance began. They got along well, spent a lot of time together, and 2 years later officially legalized their relationship. After the wedding, the couple moved to a provincial place called Yapton, with a population of only 3,000 people. Soon the couple had a son, and the new parents began to slowly develop their own business, creating authors' soft toys, the images of which they invented together. In parallel, Dina worked as a cashier in a construction organization, and their family, according to neighbors, was quite happy and prosperous. The head of the family was often away on business matters, and was absent from home for long periods of time. With neighbors, the man practically did not communicate, but his wife, on the contrary, quickly made acquaintances with local residents. Dina knew how to win the favor of others easily, and gained their trust. In addition, men often paid attention to the attractive young woman, and even tried to court her. At the dawn of the 90s, Dina met a young journalist named Julian Webb. The man offered her to work as a model for advertising clothing and household appliances, and soon her pictures were painted on the pages of local newspapers and magazines. Dina was eager to pose and felt at ease in front of the camera. By then, Lee Wyatt hadn't been home for months, and none of the neighbors had any idea where he was or why he'd been gone so long. His wife apparently did not miss him too much, having had an affair with Julian. Just 3 months after meeting the journalist, she introduced the chosen one to his parents, saying that he was going to marry her. Subsequently, Webb's mother recalled that she was quite surprised by such a hasty decision of her son. In addition, a potential daughter-in-law, who was a few years older than Julian, did not inspire her confidence. When the neighbors learned about the upcoming wedding, they were puzzled because they knew that Dina was already legally married to another man. However, her husband hadn't been home for months, and no one knew for sure where he was or what was wrong with him. As it later turned out, all this time, Lee was in the small town of New Quay, located almost on the other side of the country. There, he lived under an assumed name and false documents, hiding, as he thought, from the mafia. In fact, the man became a victim of skillful lies of his wife, who convinced him that their family was in mortal danger and escape was the only way out. The couple, as mentioned, were engaged in creating authors' soft toys, and their most successful creation was Leprechaun Sean, which sold well and gained a certain popularity. In early 1991, Dina told her husband that their creation had piqued the interest of the corporation Disney and was ready to pay £50 million sterling for the opportunity to use this character. But the joy was short-lived, and soon the woman reported that representatives of the criminal world, having learned about the big deal, wanted to get most of the money, threatening otherwise to kill the whole family. Dina also came up with a way out of the situation, convincing her husband that he needed to hide. Lee quickly acquired fake documents and went on the run. But before this, the cunning woman persuaded Lee to write several threatening letters to her and make several similar recordings of phone calls, which allegedly were supposed to be proof that he hates his wife so that the mafia would stop pursuing her. The trusting husband, not suspecting anything, did as his wife told him to do and then fled. In a foreign city with no home or friends, Lee was ready to take on any job, and all the money he earned was sent to his wife and son so that his family did not need anything. Most likely, this escape really saved his life, but the threat came not from fictional bandits but from his own wife. In November of the same 1991, Dina married her new favorite, Julian, and the wedding couple played on the very money that faithfully sent home deceived Lee. Webb was madly in love and happy, but soon after the wedding, neighbors began to notice that the woman regularly visited her lovers while her husband was at work. After a while, she informed Julian that she was terminally ill and was fired from her job because of it. The story with a fatal diagnosis and dismissal turned out to be a lie from the first to the last word. It also turned out that, from the accounts of the company where Dina worked, a large amount of money was missing, and the main suspect in this crime was herself. Then the woman accused her first husband, Lee Wyatt, who allegedly forced her to go to the crime by threats. As evidence, she provided the very letters and audio recordings that she herself had previously convinced him to make. Wyatt himself returned home as soon as he learned that his spouse had remarried. The case was limited to a scandal, and although Dina claimed that he had beaten her, there was no evidence of this. Nevertheless, the detective sided with the woman, so Lee again had to leave Yapton in a hurry. In love, Julian's situation did not embarrass him at all, and he gave his wife all his savings for the treatment of her fictitious fatal disease. But time passed, the money melted, and the husband began to wonder how the treatment was progressing. It turned out that the woman did not have a single medical document confirming her diagnosis. Relationships in the family broke down. Neighbors heard how the spouses fought loudly, and in June 1994, the day after celebrating Julian's 31st birthday, he died suddenly. The evening before the tragedy, his mother called him, but Dina reported that her husband wasn't feeling well and couldn't answer. Julian's mother asked her sister-in-law to call an ambulance, but she ignored her request. The expert examination showed that the young man died of a drug overdose, but for some reason, no one saw a criminal trace in this tragedy, and his wife insisted that her husband voluntarily decided to end his life. In addition, she demanded that Julian's body be cremated, but his parents were strongly opposed to this. Also, after the death of her husband, Dina tried to get a large insurance payment, but she was denied because their marriage was recognized as invalid. At the funeral, Dina did not even try to cry or depict grief. On the contrary, she chose a frank outfit and behaved defiantly. Almost immediately afterward, the widowed woman began to spin numerous novels and affairs. She openly brought lovers to her house, not hiding from the neighbors. Only in 1997 did Dina file for divorce from her first legal husband, and less than a year later, she met Richard Thompson, who immediately managed to charm her. Not thinking long, she told the new lover that she suffered from a serious illness and had to live a very short time. Blinded by love, the man said that he would turn the last months of her life into a fairy tale and was ready to spend all his savings on this. The wedding couple played in one of the best hotels in Florida. There they spent their honeymoon and then returned to their England, settling on its southern coast in the city of Brighton. According to Richard's memories, his wife literally bewitched him with her care and support. She also skillfully pretended to share all his views and aspirations. He had always dreamed of owning his own boat to professionally engage in fishing, and his wife not only approved this idea but also offered him to open a company that provides a yacht for rent so that he could not only fish himself but also teach it to others. Less than a year after the wedding, during a New Year's Eve celebration, Dina gave her husband a romantic dinner. They took a bath together, and afterward, she said she had prepared a special gift and asked her husband's permission to tie him up. Richard, not suspecting anything wrong, readily agreed. But as soon as he had the ropes on his hands, a blindfold over his eyes, and a gag in his mouth, he was suddenly struck hard on the head with a bat, followed by another. Luckily, Richard not only did not lose consciousness but managed to free himself quickly. Then, Dina grabbed a knife and wounded her husband in the shoulder. Richard knocked the weapon out of his wife's hands, immobilized her, and called the police. Dina burst into tears, admitted that all this time she had lied to him and spent all his money. However, already at the station, she pulled herself together and began to claim that it was her husband who attacked her, and she was only defending herself. The story did not end there, and a day later, a real estate agent came to Richard's house to sell the house. He had an appointment with the landlady, who warned him that her husband had left for America on a business trip. At that moment, Richard realized that his wife was planning to kill him, sell the house, and run away with the money. No one would look for Thompson himself for a long time, thinking that he had gone across the ocean. In the course of court proceedings, it turned out that the woman had withdrawn all the money from her husband's bank accounts, forging his signature, and also used his credit cards, accumulating a lot of debts. The case gained wide resonance, and other men began to apply to the police, former lovers of Dina, whom she deceived and cleaned to the thread, telling about a fictitious incurable disease. Then also remembered the first husband of the woman, who had to hide for many years, first from her fictitious pursuers from the mafia, and then from the police. It was finally revealed that it was Dina who stole the company in which she worked, accusing her husband of everything. However, the jury, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence, acquitted the woman in the case of the attack on her husband Richard Thompson, and Richard himself was accused of seeking to attract attention to himself, making up such a story. Nevertheless, Dina was found guilty of numerous financial frauds and sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison. The hype around Dina Thompson also reminded about the strange sudden death of her second husband, journalist Julian Webb. The woman herself told completely different versions and circumstances of his death. She said that her husband was poisoned by steroids, which he took to keep himself in shape, then claimed that he drank a lot and fell asleep in the sun, getting sunstroke, and at the inquest and in general said that he took his own life despite her caution. Dina once confessed to her best friend that she had poisoned her husband by putting potent drugs in a spicy dish that he adored. The police managed to track down the owner of the diner where Julian often dined and ordered food to take home. He recalled that the day before the tragedy, Webb's wife took out rice and chicken curry, and then the investigators guessed that it was this seasoning that interrupted the specific flavor of the drugs. In connection with the newly discovered circumstances, a new investigation was initiated and Julian's body was exhumed and sent for examination. As it turned out, the man was poisoned by a large dose of powerful antidepressants added to his favorite dish with curry and strengthened their effect with aspirin, which Dina dissolved in her husband's drink. At the time of the call to his mother, Webb was still alive and could be saved, but it was not part of the plans of his wife. In 2003, the Black Widow was finally brought to trial. The investigator at the hearing characterized her as the most dangerous woman he had ever had to deal with, and the judge noted that she was a skilled and very dodgy liar. Dina Thompson was sentenced to life in prison, but with parole eligibility after 16 years. The story of the crimes of the Black Widow formed the basis of numerous documentary detectives actively discussed in TV shows and mused in the press. Even after Dina was behind bars, detectives unearthed another dark story from her past. As it turned out, one of her first lovers disappeared without a trace and to this day has not been found alive or dead. The young man's name was Stoyan Kostov and he lived in Bulgaria, where Dina herself trained as a gymnast in the late 70s. Between them began a romantic relationship, and afterwards the guy disappeared forever. The investigation does not exclude that Dina is directly related to this case, and Kostov became one of her first victims, but it was not possible to prove anything. While serving her sentence, Thompson worked with a prison psychologist and underwent rehabilitation courses. Despite her exemplary behavior and the right words about re-education and realization of her mistakes, Dina, according to the detective in charge of her case, does not feel remorse and pangs of conscience and therefore can reoffend. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2022, the 61-year-old Black Widow was released from prison. After learning about it, Richard Thompson said that now he will not feel safe because he does not know what to expect from his former spouse. Now Dina is obliged to report to the police about all her connections and relationships, observe curfew and report on all financial transactions. She is also forbidden to approach her ex-husbands and lovers affected by her actions. She is forced to wear a special tracking bracelet on her leg that records all her movements. A few months after her release, Thompson was captured by journalists while returning from a store with shopping in a large bag. Curiously, on the ring finger of her right hand was a massive ring strongly resembling an engagement ring. It is possible that another gullible victim fell into the net of the Black Widow. Story 3. On the morning of June 29, 2013, the vice president of loss prevention at the popular Toys R Us retail store in New York received a call from the police. They told him that there had been an incident at the Hamburg store, and they urgently needed his assistance. Bernie Grusa rushed to the store, and when he got there, the police shared with him the heartbreaking news. The store manager, Larry Wells, had been fatally stabbed in his office during the early morning shift. He was on duty at 4 a.m. that morning, helping the night staff unpack stock as well as prepare for the opening of the store that morning. There were only 4 other employees with him on duty that morning, yet none of them could tell the police who had murdered Larry. With no signs of forced entry or indication that anyone else had been there, police began to suspect that it may have been an inside job. They thought that the killer was most probably one of the 4 employees who had worked with Larry that morning, but their police intuition wasn't able to narrow down on a suspect. All 4 employees caught the attention of the police for various reasons, but there was no clear evidence pointing to the culprit. So, in their quest to solve the case, the police turned to Bernie Grusa, the vice president of loss prevention, hoping that the store's CCTV footage could shed some light on what happened that morning. As the police meticulously examined the CCTV footage frame by frame, they suddenly spotted something that would throw the case wide open. Larry Wells was born on September 22, 1977, in Dunkirk, New York. As a child, he was shy, quiet, and a bit reserved around others. It took him some time to open up, but once he did, his warm and helpful nature became evident to everyone around him, and he was definitely the you could always rely on. During his time in high school, he met his wife, Jill, and right from the start, they were inseparable. Even though they were only 15 years old when they started dating, they both knew that this relationship was so much more than just a high school fling. Their bond grew stronger over time, and they became each other's pillars of support. After completing high school, Larry and Jill attended the State University of New York, at where Larry graduated with a degree in elementary education and went on to earn a master's from Walden University. Before landing a job as a substitute teacher at an elementary school, Larry felt that he was living out his passion. He loved being around kids, and his friendly, approachable demeanor allowed him to easily form strong bonds with his students. The fact that Larry was somewhat of a big kid himself made him instantly relatable to his students, and he had a knack for bringing out the best in them. By the time 2006 rolled around, Larry had big aspirations for the future he was building with his wife. He had dreams of becoming financially stable, starting a family of his own, and even owning his own house. And even though he loved his work as a teacher, he became frustrated with not being able to find permanent work. Being in and out of a job at regular intervals meant that he couldn't sufficiently plan for the future. That's how he ended up taking a job at Toys R Us. The job was only supposed to be a temporary solution while he searched for permanent employment in the education sector. However, fate had other plans for Larry. Despite initially viewing the job at Toys R Us as a stopgap measure, he quickly demonstrated his dedication and leadership skills, which quickly propelled him through the ranks, eventually becoming the store manager at the Hamburg branch. By 2013, Larry had been dedicatedly working at the store for nearly 6 years, and his life was finally shaping up just as he had always dreamed. His bond with his wife had grown stronger than ever, and the couple was overjoyed to have started their own family. In fact, Jill was pregnant with their second daughter, and they were eagerly looking forward to expanding their little family. Though retail work often demanded long and irregular hours, including weekends and holidays, Larry took it all in his stride, knowing that it came with the territory. So, when Larry was requested to work on Saturday, June 29, 2013, he saw it as just another working day, never imagining the horrors which would unfold. Larry arrived at the store at 3:55 a.m. so that he could assist the night shift employees, Cindy and Isaac, with unpacking stock and preparing the store for opening. They had been tirelessly stocking shelves throughout and Larry thought that they would appreciate the help. At 4:53 a.m., Larry received a radio call from Anthony, another employee at the store who was scheduled to start his shift at 5 a.m. The store's doors were all locked, and only the manager had the authority to let him in. At this time, Larry and the 3 other employees, Cindy, Isaac, and Anthony, were the only ones in the store, each of them working in different sections of the store, relying on their radios to communicate with one another. Just after 5 a.m., another store employee named Richard arrived at work, just as Anthony had done a few moments earlier. Richard radios Larry to let him in, but strangely, Larry doesn't respond to the call. Richard tries to open the door, but, as expected, he found it to be locked. Still unable to get hold of Larry, Richard walks around the perimeter of the store and, to his surprise, he finds that the door of the adjacent Babies R Us store is unlocked. Richard then enters through this door, punches in for his shift, and starts working. The employees all went about their job as usual, continuing their work in their respective aisles until 5:40 a.m., when Isaac became increasingly annoyed by a persistent beeping sound echoing through the store. Determined to put an end to the disturbance, he picks up his radio and calls his manager to ask that he switch off the alarm. Larry doesn't respond to the call, so after trying for a second time, Isaac assumes that Larry is probably on another call in his office. So he radios Cindy, asking her to go check up on Larry and ask him to turn off the alarm. Cindy happily obliges and makes her way to Larry's office. In less than a minute, A howling scream echoes through the store. The other employees, all sensing the dread in Cindy's voice, rush to their manager's office, only to find Larry slouched in his chair, bleeding from a gunshot wound, according to Cindy's initial observation. She immediately dialed 911 and within a couple of minutes, help arrived. After checking Larry's pulse, they determined that although he was non-responsive, his heart was still beating. Acting quickly, paramedics placed him in an ambulance and raced him to the hospital, but tragically, Larry was pronounced dead upon arrival. The cause of his death was confirmed to be due to severe blood loss, and contrary to the initial belief of a gunshot, it was later determined that he had been stabbed 3 times in the chest. When police arrived at the scene, their first thought was that it had to be one of the 4 employees who was with Larry in the store, especially since there was no sign of forced entry. Cindy was the first person to draw the police's attention. She was the one who worked closest to Larry's office, and she was the one who had found him. Richard was also a prime suspect. He had arrived late for work that morning, and he was also the last person to enter the store. He also said that he entered through the Babies R Us store, which was different from the usual store protocol. Police also noticed that Isaac seemed to be nervous and evasive, while Anthony blatantly refused to cooperate or answer any questions. So, with no clear leads and each suspect presenting their own potential reasons for suspicion, the police decided to turn their attention to the store's CCTV footage, hoping it could shed light on the events of that tragic morning. They immediately called Bernard Grusa, the vice president and regional manager for loss prevention, and within 20 minutes Bernard was there. He immediately assisted the police with any questions they had, and explained that he was the one who hired Larry for the manager role and considered him not just an employee, but a close friend as well. He then took the police to Larry's office, where they went to review the surveillance footage, and what they would find was nothing short of shocking. At 4:20 a.m., approximately 25 minutes after Larry Wells had arrived at work, the surveillance footage reveals a person attempting to break into the store by manipulating the lock. The intruder gains entry through the adjoining Babies R Us section. Despite the grainy and low-resolution quality of the footage, the police were able to establish that the individual was a man wearing a scarf, cap, and sweatpants, and he appeared to be carrying a knife. Police watched as the man sneaked through the aisles of the store, seemingly trying to evade the cameras, skillfully maneuvering through the aisles before entering the manager's office and closing the door behind him. 3 minutes after the man entered the manager's office, the surveillance video stopped. It was clear that the man in the footage had unplugged the recording equipment to ensure that he wasn't captured on camera. Police believe that Larry Wells entered the office a short while later, and that was when the man attacked him. After viewing the surveillance footage, the police were now certain of 2 things. First, the fact that the intruder was able to move through the store without being detected, and then strategically unplugged the surveillance equipment strongly suggested that it was likely an inside job. Second, after observing the suspect on camera, the police were able to determine that none of the other employees who were present in the could have been the killer. So, the police set about trying to uncover more evidence. During the initial search of the office, police found a black and gold baseball cap, which seemed to match the cap that the killer was wearing in the video. They suspected that he may have dropped it on his way out. Police immediately sent it for DNA testing, hoping that they would find a match. Unfortunately, the DNA didn't come back as a match to anyone in the database, so police had to rely on good old detective work. Approaching every single Toys R Us store employee and asking them to willingly provide a DNA sample. If their theory about an inside job was accurate, they believed this method would be the best way to narrow down the list of suspects and identify the person responsible for the heinous crime. It was June 29th when Lawrence Wells was found stabbed to death inside a Hamburg Toys R Us. Despite surveillance pictures, a hefty reward, and desperate pleas from family members, his killer remains on the run. Over the course of the next 2 months, the police embarked on a process of collecting DNA samples from the dozens of store employees and eliminating them one by one, without any success in finding a match to the suspect's DNA. But as they approached the stage where nearly every single employee had been tested, they noticed that one notable name hadn't yet provided a sample. Bernard Grusa, the regional vice president for loss prevention, was a notable absentee from the DNA testing. He had been so helpful during the initial stages of the investigation, so they found it odd that he hadn't provided his DNA sample when so many others had willingly done so. Police immediately contacted him on his phone to try and schedule a meeting, but it seemed that setting up a face-to-face meeting with Bernard was proving all too difficult. He had apparently had a rough time dealing with Larry's death, so he took an extended leave of absence from work and even moved out of the house he shared with his wife. After approaching his wife for assistance, police quickly learned that Grusa didn't actually leave his house of his own accord, but that his wife had actually taken out a protection order against him and asked him to leave. They learned that only a few weeks before Larry was murdered, Grusa and his wife had an argument. The argument became so heated that Grusa pushed his wife out of the way before running upstairs to the master bedroom and closing the door behind him. A few moments later, his wife heard a gunshot, so when she raced upstairs to check up on her husband, she found Bernard laying face down on the floor. When his panicked wife rolled him over to check if he was okay, Grusa opened his eyes and said that he just wanted to check if she still loved him. It turns out that he fired the gun out of the window to make his wife believe that he shot himself. Police learned that Grusa was actually staying with his father, so they made their way to his dad's house unannounced, and here they found Bernard Grusa. He was a little bit shocked to see the police, but he cooperated with them and willingly provided his DNA sample. 2 months later, the results came back, and shockingly, his DNA was an exact match to the DNA found on the baseball cap and DVR machine in Larry's office. Bernard maintained his innocence, claiming that his DNA being on the DVR machine wasn't unusual, as he frequently visited Larry's office due to his role as the VP for loss prevention. He asserted that he had never seen the baseball cap before and had no idea how his DNA ended up on it. Bernard Grusa was arrested for the murder of Larry Wells, and during the police investigation, they uncovered a chilling motive for the murder. Despite being the regional vice president and receiving a salary of around $90,000, it seems that Bernard was drowning in debt. He had huge amounts of medical bills due to his wife being diagnosed with cancer, as well as the fact that he lived way beyond his means. He had accumulated debt of over $1 million and subsequently declared bankruptcy. Police also learned that Grusa had been stealing merchandise from various Toys R Us stores, only to sell the goods on eBay for a fraction of the costs. It was evident that he had been running this scheme for a couple of years, even continuing the scheme after Larry's murder. They estimated that Grusa had stolen over $200,000 worth of merchandise from the stores he was responsible for and then sold the items online. In July 2014, Bernard Grusa made a deal with the state where he agreed to plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter in exchange for him admitting to all of his crimes, as well as forfeiting any appeals. Bernard Grusa admitted to the court that on the morning of June 29, 2013, he entered the Toys R Us store using his key. He said that he entered Larry's office with the intention of stealing money from the safe. He said that Larry walked in on him in the process of trying to open the safe, and that's when he panicked and stabbed Larry. He maintained that he never intended on killing anyone when he entered the store, but only acted out after Larry walked in on him. He also admitted to stealing over $200,000 worth of merchandise from the franchise, as well as over $19,000 in cash from the other branches he was responsible for. Bernard Grusa was sentenced to the maximum penalty of 25 years in prison. My personal opinion is if you plunge a knife into somebody's chest, or you plunge a knife into somebody's belly, that manifests an intent to kill somebody, okay? The appellate courts of the state have held that doing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 times is not enough to evince an intent to kill. Sedita says one of the strongest motivating factors in the decision to offer Grusa a plea deal was that Wells' family accepted it. Story 4. Now we're covering the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi, a case known for its uniquely bizarre and disturbing details. When 22-year-old Lindsay Hawker traveled to Tokyo to teach English, it was supposed to be the start of an amazing adventure. Instead, it would turn into something so unimaginably horrific that it would become the subject of a best-selling memoir and later a movie. As for Lindsay's killer, his desperate attempts to avoid identification were so gruesome that they'd earn him a near-cult hero status. So prepare yourselves. This is the disturbing story of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Before we start, We would like to send our heartfelt sympathies to the loved ones of Lindsay and Hawker, whose life was ended in such a savage and senseless way. This story takes us to Tokyo, Japan, a megacity of 35 million inhabitants, famous for both the and the traditional. It's home to anime, manga, electronic megastores, and more Michelin stars than London and Paris combined. Tokyo is a 24-hour metropolis that combines millennial-old traditions with futuristic technology, where neon-lit skyscrapers sit side by side with historic temples. It was to the Itagawa ward of Tokyo that 22-year-old Lindsay Hawker arrived in October 2007, ready to start her new job at the Tokyo branch of Nova, Japan's largest private English school. Lindsay was from a town near Coventry in Warwickshire, England, where she had grown up in a close-knit family with parents Bill and Julia and two sisters. Lindsay was known for her boundless enthusiasm for life. She was also bright and ambitious, graduating with a first-class honors degree in biology from the University of Leeds in the summer of 2007. After years of studying, Lindsay was ready for a change and made plans for a world trip with her boyfriend of 4 years, Ryan Garside. Lindsay would set off first, heading to Tokyo, where she would teach English before her boyfriend would join her the following summer. Lindsay adapted fast to life on the other side of the globe. She made solid friends with her two roommates, with whom she shared an apartment. Her employers at Nova said she put every effort into her new role. She communicated daily with her friends and family about life in Tokyo. In one email to her sisters, she described how the city of Tokyo felt safe and secure, safer, in fact, than Britain. They were words that would later haunt her family. On the morning of March 25th, she packed her tote bag with her teaching materials, said goodbye to her roommates, and left the apartment on her bike. She would never return again. On March 26, 2007, at 2:30 p.m., Lindsay's father received a call from a staff member at the Nova Language School. Lindsay had failed to turn up for her classes for 2 days in a row. Her roommates had already tried to contact the police when Lindsay had failed to return home from work the previous evening, but the message had not been conveyed to the proper authorities within the department. Lindsay's family were distraught. Her father booked a flight to Tokyo for himself and Lindsay's boyfriend, Ryan. At Lindsay's apartment, officers tried to piece together Lindsay's last movements. Both her roommates and her boyfriend, Ryan, had vital information to share, and all of it created a clear and chilling picture. 6 days earlier, on March 20th, Lindsay had been traveling home on the train after drinks at a bar called Hippie Dip Pie Do when a strange man approached her. He was several years older than her and claimed to be one of her students in her class. But Lindsay knew all of her students, and he was not one of them. Lindsay had politely excused herself and exited the train at her station. She had almost arrived home on her bike when she suddenly spotted the man right behind her, jogging fast. He had tailed her all the way from the station and now pitched up on her doorstep. He asked again if she recognized him. Now a little frightened, Lindsay repeated that she didn't. This time, he explained that he wanted to go abroad to study and was desperate for an English tutor. He then asked her for a glass of water. Thinking he was simply enthusiastic and maybe a little eccentric, Lindsay invited him into her apartment, where her roommates were both home. Inside, he sketched a picture of Lindsay and signed it with his name, Tetsuya Ichihashi, a phone number, and an email address. Officers now searched Lindsay's room, where they located the sketch the man had given her. Lindsay, her roommate said, had agreed to meet the man in a cafe for an English lesson. They had warned her against it, but Lindsay could see no harm in it, and on March 20th had set off to meet him at the Duo Tour Cafe. It was the last time they'd see her. Lindsay's last Facebook message was written on March 20th and had said, "Love you lots. Don't worry about the guy who chased me home. It's just crazy, Japan. Miss you." Meanwhile, police had pulled grainy surveillance footage from the morning of March 25, 2007, at the Duo Tour Cafe near the station in East Tokyo. The footage captured Lindsay and the mysterious man named Ichihashi ordering drinks at the counter. Lindsay appears to feel awkward, repeatedly pushing her hair aside. The pair sits together at a table for 50 minutes while Lindsay gives him a language lesson. When it's time to leave, Ichihashi makes exaggerated gestures of searching and failing to find his money. At 10 a.m., the pair gets up and leaves and are seen getting into a taxi together. By 5:20 p.m. on the evening of March 26th, two officers had located and arrived at Tatsuya's apartment in Ichikawa. The man who Lindsay had just gotten into a taxi with had, in fact, been watching her for months. 28-year-old Tatsuya Ichihashi lived alone in a 3-bedroom apartment bought for him by his parents in the Yukiba Prefecture, a suburban town east of Tokyo. The son of 2 wealthy professionals, his mother was a dentist, and his father a brain surgeon. Tatsuya hadn't inherited either of his parents' ambition or academic ability. Under his parents' duress, he attended Chiba University and graduated with a major in horticulture in 2005. But he had never worked in the field of horticulture and had spent the past 2 years living off of his parents' monthly allowance. Tatsuya found himself a girlfriend during his time at college, but those who knew him described him as a loner, someone known in Japanese culture as a hikikomori, or someone who suffers extreme degrees of social isolation. He was obsessed with violent manga and, for several years, had been displaying some troubling behavior. 2 years earlier, he had assaulted a woman on a street while attempting to rob her. The woman had settled out of court with Tatsuya's parents. While at university, Tatsuya had been given a formal warning for stalking a woman. Oddly, his girlfriend later described their relationship as stable and serious. She would visit him several times during his early years in prison. She said Tatsuya was obsessed with physical fitness and would spend hours each day working out at the gym and regularly cycling 15 miles a day. By 2007, however, there were signs that Tatsuya's mental health was deteriorating. He reportedly told acquaintances that he felt he was becoming unstable, but it's not clear whether anyone urged him to seek help. Instead, it seems he developed a fixation with a random stranger, the young British English language teacher Lindsay Hawker. According to police, Tatsuya had stalked Lindsay Hawker for several months before working up the courage to approach her on the train. He spotted the logo for the English language school on her and used it as an excuse to connect with her. He now used the excuse of having no money to lure her to his apartment in Ichikawa, which was a 5-minute drive away. Once outside, Lindsay asked the taxi driver to wait for her while she went in to collect the money. 7 minutes passed with no signs of Lindsay, and the taxi driver drove away. He was the last person other than her killer to see her alive. Once at Tatsuya's apartment, police waited outside for him to exit. They were not permitted by Japanese law to knock without proper cause. Knowing his previous allegations of stalking and robbery, they had called for backup. By 8 p.m., 9 officers had assembled on both the ground floor and outside of his 4th-floor apartment. 2 hours after the last officers arrived, Tatsuya burst out of his apartment and headed down the building's fire escape. He was barefoot and carrying a rucksack with several officers close behind him. Tatsuya evaded them by vaulting the last stairway to the ground and sprinting into the street. He was spotted once more by police officers, but once again, evaded them by zigzagging through the street. It was the closest they would get to catching him for more than 2 years. As for the location of Lindsay, on the other hand, that would happen much sooner. On Tatsuya's balcony, police noticed a bathtub had been freshly filled with a mix of sand and compost. A potted plant stood next to the bath, as though he had left before having a chance to plant it, and Tatsuya had not quite finished his task. A small white hand protruded from the mixture in the bathtub. Neighbors would later say they heard a heavy scraping sound the evening before, undoubtedly the sound of Tatsuya dragging his bathtub onto the balcony of his apartment. Police uncovered Lindsay's naked body from inside the bathtub. She had been gagged with a scarf, and her feet and hands had been bound with gardening ties. Bruising across her upper body suggested she had endured a savage and prolonged attack. Both Lindsay and Tatsuya had been trained in martial arts, but Lindsay had fought off her attacker bravely. Still, she was no match for Tatsuya in strength. Egg-sized bruises on the left side of her face suggested that she had been struck repeatedly with a fist, while lesser marks on her upper body were likely the result of collisions with furniture. She had been whipped and strangled so violently that the cartilage in her neck was broken. Her head had been shaved, and her hair placed in a plastic bag. Her belongings were found strewn about the room. At 3 a.m. on March 27th, Lindsay's parents received the call no parent ever wants to receive. A body had been found. The trip they had booked to search for their daughter now became a journey to identify her remains. Her father, Bill, said that when he saw her, "I knew it was Lindsay because she was so tall and because she was my daughter. But she was so badly beaten. My life, my soul, just fell from beneath me." Wanted posters containing images of Tatsuya now flooded Tokyo. Soon, 1,000 posters had been distributed nationwide. Some showed chilling pictures of Tatsuya in possible disguises, including the killer disguised as a woman. His images were broadcast across national and international news channels. Sightings of Tatsuya came pouring in from all over Japan. Multiple sightings placed him in Kabukicho, a red light district of Tokyo. Police investigated every lead, but he could not be located. Soon, there were rumors that he'd escaped the country or quietly killed himself. Days turned into weeks and then months. By October 2008, 140 officers had been assigned to the investigation. Despite 8,000 reported sightings and widespread media coverage, police were no closer to finding Tatsuya. By the end of the year, the investigation was stalling. The desperate Hacker family launched a website appealing for information on Tatsuya Ichihashi's whereabouts. Tatsuya's parents, who had remained silent, now came under wrongful suspicion from the public. In response, his mother called a daytime television program and urged her son to give himself up. "It's Mom, Tatsuya," she said in an audio message. "Dad and Mom have decided to speak about our feelings, although we know you won't like this," she said before telling him to contact the police. Later, the couple appeared on television to apologize for their son's crime. In the lead-up to the second anniversary, police printed out life-size cardboard cutouts of Tatsuya to try to raise awareness among the public. The Hawkers returned to Tokyo to plead for information on their daughter's killer. Police increased the reward for information leading to his arrest from 1 million yen to 10 million yen, or the equivalent of about $121,000. Meanwhile, a far sicker interest in the fugitive had been blossoming online. Fan clubs had begun popping up all over the internet, glorifying Tatsuya as an outlaw and a fugitive hero. He became known as Japan's most handsome criminal, nicknamed the Fugitive Sullen Prince and Lord Ichi, and even gaining popularity with young males. Blogs and support groups opened up dedicated to the murderer. What no one knew, of course, was that the appearance of the man police had been hunting had changed quite significantly in the 2 years since they printed his face on wanted posters across Japan. According to an account he later published in a best-selling memoir, Tatsuya had initially wandered around Tokyo with no money or credit cards and no passport that would enable him to leave the country. He hid out among the tramps in the Flophouse district of the Ibukari prefecture northwest of Tokyo. It was only when he saw his face plastered across wanted posters that he realized the scale of the manhunt. He took to living his life as a fugitive, covering his face beneath the hat, wearing glasses, avoiding surveillance cameras, and constantly staying on the move. He didn't contact a single friend or family member, but as the nationwide manhunt gained momentum, he turned to more drastic attempts to disguise his identity. He needed to change his appearance, he realized, and took on that task himself. Using a box cutter, he sliced the moles off of his left cheek, markings that had struck him as particularly prominent in his wanted pictures. He then cut off part of his lower lip with scissors in an effort to make them thinner. His first attempt failed when he was unable to push through the excruciating pain, but he did finish the job a few days later in a public bathroom. He then bound up his nose with a thread and needle to make it narrower. While his face healed, he wore multiple surgical masks. Traveling by train and bus, Tatsuya headed south, where he embarked on a pilgrimage of temples in the southwestern island of Shikoku. He wanted to atone for the killing, and when visiting shrines, he would pray for Haka to come back to life, an idea he got from a novel in which the dead are resurrected after someone who is thinking of them tours those same temples. His paranoia over being recognized consumed him, driving him to seek out further changes to his appearance, this time with the help of a plastic surgeon, though for that, he would need money. Using the name and address of a dead man called Kosuke Inoue, Tatsuya took a job at a construction company in Osaka, where he worked for the next 13 months, saving about 1 million yen. He spent most of the money on 2 cosmetic surgery operations, one to acquire a longer and narrower nose, and the second to raise the bridge of his nose. He gave false names and addresses at the clinics and failed to return for any follow-up appointments. Colleagues later said he rarely mixed with them, spending most of his time reading comics and watching videos in his room at the company's dormitory. He never removed his red cap or black-rimmed glasses in public. When he was persuaded to join the company bowling trip in April, he hid behind a colleague in a group photograph. In the end, the attempts to obscure his identity were his undoing. Tatsuya visited a clinic in the southwestern city of Fukuoka in mid-October with a request to change the shape of his mouth. On October 24th, he visited a clinic in Nagoya where he had his nose uplifted. But staff at the clinic were intrigued by the strange scars on his left cheek where he had removed his moles. They reported his visit to police and submitted multiple pictures of the man who had visited their clinic. Police identified the man as Tatsuya. On the 4th of November 2009, police released the images to the press, disclosing that he had undergone plastic surgery. His new image was soon splashed all over the Japanese news. These images showed a very different Tatsuya Ichihashi. He was minus the two prominent moles on his left cheek. He had a thinner bottom lip, a higher bridge to his nose, and a double fold to his eyelids. Tatsuya wrote in his memoir that he froze when he saw the news on TV with his image. "My heart raced," he wrote. "I gazed at it, trembling." He immediately got a haircut and bought a party disguise set, including a beard, sideburns, and mustache, and then headed to the ferry terminal at Osaka. On November 10, 2009, moments before he was due to set sail for Okinawa, an island in Japan's far south, a passerby's gaze was drawn to a tall, suspicious-looking youth wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a paper surgical mask. More than 2.5 years after he had become one of Japan's most wanted suspects, Tatsuya Ichihashi was arrested at the ferry terminal in Osaka for the murder of Lindsay Hawker. This has been a long, hard battle for the Hawkers, and the battle is over. We've worked tirelessly as a family. We've never given in for our daughter. We've never given in. We wanted justice, and we finally got justice. I'd also just like to thank the Japanese police. After a very bungled start to my daughter's murder, they've got their man. They've worked tirelessly, and they've eventually gotten a man, and the chief officer told me they would get the man sooner or later. We're just so relieved that this part of our life is over. I can go down to my daughter's grave this afternoon and tell her, thank you. I'd just like to say, I'd like to echo what my parents have said, but also I hope that our case kind of gives other families some kind of hope. We thank the Hawkers. We haven't given up. Not from day one, all the sleepless nights, all the not eating, all the crying, all the tears. It's all been worth it now, and we've got what we wanted, which was justice for Lindsay. Story 5. You never really know what someone is dealing with behind closed doors, and this is especially true of those lives we follow on social media in the eyes of their 1 million plus social media fans. Anna and Ali Abulabin were the perfect couple. Beautiful people, leading a beautiful, glamorous life. It was an image that would be shattered in the most gruesome of ways on October 21st, 2021. This is the story of Anna and Ali Abulabin. It is a story of a toxic and obsessive love, hidden from the world behind a carefully curated public image, and the jealous rage that would end it in the most savage way imaginable. I've never met anyone else like you, and I don't think I ever will. I'm not saying that because it's cliché. I'm saying that because no one's ever moved me the way that you do. San Diego is frequently coined America's finest city. Located on the coast of Southern California, San Diego has an idyllic climate, 70 miles of white sand beaches, a vibrant nightlife, and an endless number of family attractions. One of the liveliest parts of town is the urban enclave known as the East Village, a trendy downtown neighborhood with over 700 businesses, a host of luxury high-rise apartment blocks, and dozens of clubs, rooftop bars, and live music venues. It was at one of these luxury high-rise apartments in the East Village of San Diego that in 2021, 28-year-old Anna Maria Abulabin was living with her husband Ali and their 5-year-old daughter Amara. From the outside looking in, the Abulabin family seemed to have it all. A fairy tale romance, stunning good looks, a beautiful daughter, a wide circle of friends, and growing fame as social media influencers. 29-year-old Ali, better known by his TikTok handle Gene Kid, had already garnered 1 million plus followers across various social media platforms for his comedy skits. Life on paper should have been perfect for the Abolibans, or at least as perfect as the choreographed images on their Instagram accounts. Life in San Diego was certainly very different from the life Anna Aboliban had led growing up. Born in 1993 in Okinawa, Japan, to Filipino parents, Anna had gone to high school at a U.S. military base in Japan, where her father had been employed. After graduating high school, Anna had earned a degree at the Technological University of the Philippines. Friends described Anna as charming, intelligent, and down-to-earth. She was also stunningly beautiful, but it was her inner beauty that made her stand out. Her best friend of 15 years, Casey Conroy, said, according to Casey, she was a genuinely good person, a kind, loving friend who felt more like a family member. The future could surely hold only promising things for the bright and vivacious young Anna. It certainly looked that way when she fell in love with Ali Aboliban, a handsome young American soldier stationed at the same U.S. military base where her father worked. 22-year-old Ali Nasser Aboliban had been born in 1992 in Staten Island to Palestinian parents. Before growing up in Virginia, Ali had been an aspiring entertainer from a young age, an extrovert who enjoyed being the center of attention. At 14, he had been the singer in a band before joining the military. It was love at first sight for both Ali and Anna, and the pair embarked on a passionate whirlwind affair. Ali, in particular, was smitten with Anna, but for Anna's friend Casey, there was something off. Ali was obsessed with Anna, she said. They had only been dating for a few weeks when Casey called her friend, only for Ali to answer. He asked her why she was calling and what she wanted. It was clear to Casey that he didn't want Anna's friends calling. He wanted Anna just for himself. Within a year of meeting her, Ali had married Anna, taken her back to his home state of Virginia, and they were expecting their first child. Once settled in Virginia, the newlyweds welcomed their beautiful baby girl, Amara Aboliban. Life in Virginia was idyllic, according to Ali, who later said they were living the American dream. Ali still yearned to be a star. He sang and wrote music, before taking up a new hobby, creating comedy skits and celebrity impersonations for TikTok, and later YouTube and Instagram. Ali described himself on his YouTube account as a guy who loves watching movies and creating parodies of my favorite characters. These characters included rapper Tekashi 69 and a favorite, the fictional movie icon Tony Montana from the 1983 movie Scarface. Fans described his impersonations of Tony Montana as uncanny and spot-on. His skits about Skyrim, a video game, were also hugely popular with fans and other social media influencers. Ali appeared to be on the brink of hitting the big time in 2019. His first video went viral, and he quickly amassed a significant following with 263,000 followers on Instagram, 950,000 fans on TikTok, and 171,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel. Meanwhile, Anna would appear in many of the skits, and she began producing her own content for Instagram, quickly gaining 11,000 followers. It's not clear whose idea it was to shift the family to San Diego. Ali claimed it was Anna's, who had friends from the military base there. For the ambitious Ali, though, who fostered dreams of becoming an actor, a move to California must have seemed like the obvious next step. Neither could have predicted just how rapidly and catastrophically things would disintegrate in the days and months to follow. The Aboliban family moved into their high-rise apartment on Island Avenue in the East Village, San Diego, in February of 2021. Surrounded by old friends and the opportunities presented by this vibrant city, the scene was set for both Anna and Ali to spread their wings, socially and professionally. And Anna was ready to do just that. Her social media posts from that time show her working out, enjoying spa days with girlfriends, and nights out on the town. She looked jaw-droppingly beautiful and impossibly glamorous. Meanwhile, Ali's social media following continued to grow. Interspersed with his own comedy skits were romantic moments of shared laughter with Anna, along with effusive proclamations of love. But this was the couple working overtime to create the illusion of the perfect romantic union. In abusive relationships, Both parties often go great lengths to hide the dysfunctional side of their relationship from the public eye, whether out of denial or shame. And then there's the extreme highs and lows that often mark toxic love, with the lows often deliberately kept out of sight. Because while Ali Abulabin took pride in having such a beautiful wife, this pride took the form of possessiveness and an extreme need for control, and Ali was losing control of his beautiful possession. Soon after they arrived, the first serious signs of trouble were beginning to show. Anna's friends in San Diego didn't like Ali, and they clued in on his controlling behavior. Anna's friends were the spiritual hippie types. It unnerved them that he carried a gun everywhere he went. He was also highly aggressive, and his friend Casey said he talked over people, interrupted people, dominated the conversation, and would boast about his success on social media. He was also all about the high life. His cousin, Louis Marinari, said that watching his wife's social life flourish was stirring up extreme jealousy and paranoia, and Ali felt that she was partying too much. He said Ali wanted to control Anna. He wanted to know what she was doing every time of the day. He became extremely jealous, and furious his wife was going out with friends, and he wasn't involved, and it drove him mad. While Ali was a funny guy and loved by his family, Ali had a dark side, his cousin said. He had observed his relationship with Anna close up, and at times found Ali's treatment of her to be abusive. And as the months wore on, that dark side rose to the forefront. Even his skits seemed to escalate in their aggression and take on a foreboding edge. It's not clear when Ali first started using cocaine. It was quickly apparent to everyone, however, when he became a regular user of the drug. Once, while on Instagram Live, a drunk Ali pulled out a bag of cocaine and started snorting it. People thought it was part of a skit until they realized it wasn't. In an apology video the next day, Ali explained that it was his first time using it, and he warned people of the dangers of drugs, but it was a weak and implausible explanation. He then ranted about how much he loved his wife, but that he didn't like her friends, who he said would bring men into their homes to cheat on their husbands. His family didn't support him, he said, and were not in touch with him. Ali's mental state was clearly unraveling, right before the eyes of his fans, whose comments now were increasingly turning towards his weight loss and state of mind, and suggestions for him to relax and be strong. One fan wrote, "I knew there was something wrong with him. He was drinking so much and looked so thin." But with his marriage disintegrating, Ali's drug use accelerated. His cousin explained that once while they were out in a bar, he pulled out a huge bag of cocaine and put it on the table. His cousin said that they would be thrown out, to which Ali said that no one could touch him. He could do whatever he wanted. He was Jin Kid. With his over 1 million followers, Ali was starting to feel like a star. Superior, untouchable, things he had always secretly known about himself. Only why couldn't he get his wife, Anna, to see the same? Ali's cousin found his obsession with his wife strange. Ali seemed to sense that he was losing her, or control of her at least. When Anna's friends called, he'd often take the phone and challenge them on why they were calling her. When they were in bars, he would scroll through his phone, looking at photos of Anna, and talking about how much he loved her, how beautiful she was, how he would never let anyone else have her. It was clear that Ali was reaching a breaking point. Things were about to implode suddenly and violently. In early October, Anna called the police and reported that Ali had pushed her in front of their daughter, giving her minor injuries. She said that Ali had also shown their daughter a loaded gun and showed her how to hold it. In a video posted around the same time, an incensed Ali is seen hurling abuse at Anna, who is off camera. He accuses her of using him to get into America. On October 18th, Anna Abulabin finally asked her husband to move out. Then she filed for a divorce and a restraining order. Just like that, something in Anna had finally snapped. But escaping an abuser is rarely as easy as that, and the prospect of losing all control over Anna was not something Ali was able or willing to accept. Ali moved into the Mission Bay Hotel, but without Anna knowing, he made a copy of their apartment's front door key. His drinking and erratic behavior had now reached new heights. In one Instagram live session streamed while driving and drinking from a bottle of red wine, he asked if any sexy females were watching him right now to send him a message. They'd caught him in a moment where he was having problems with his wife, he said. Meanwhile, he was calling Anna incessantly. When he couldn't get through, he'd call her friends or anyone else who would listen. He wanted to know where she was, what she was doing, and why she wouldn't take his calls. Friends begged him to give her some time and space, but he was living in a state of denial, his cousin said, and his obsession with Anna only increased by the day. He seemed to be in shock about her request for a divorce and was losing his mind over it. He felt she was punishing him and that she couldn't actually be serious and was unable to consider the possibility that she might actually go through with it. His cousin urged him to move on. He assured him that he could find someone else. He could get anyone he wanted. Ali, ever the egomaniac, agreed with him, but he was equally emphatic over the fact that he didn't want anyone else. He only wanted his wife, and he would go to any lengths to get her. No one knew just how dark the depths of Ali's soul really were, and the darkness was about to unleash itself for the world to see. 3 days later, on October 21st, Ali Abulabin sneaked back into the apartment while his wife was out with the key. He had duplicated and vandalized it. He then phoned her to tell her what he had done. But there was one thing he hadn't mentioned to Anna. Ali had surreptitiously installed a spying app on their daughter's iPad that would allow him to listen to what was happening inside the house from his telephone. When Anna returned to the house later that day, she brought her friend Rayburn Cadenas Barron with her. Rayburn was 29 and a San Diego native. He was a family-oriented person, a warm and thoughtful person, someone who friends said they could depend on. And when Anna called on him for help that day, possibly to help clean up the apartment or for protection, knowing that Ali had a key and could appear at any moment, he dropped everything to help her. It would be the final catalyst for a deranged Ali. Ali Abulabin was listening to the app on his phone when he heard the sound of his wife and a male voice talking and giggling, and he went into a homicidal rage. He didn't know whose voice he had heard, just that it was male. Just before 3 p.m., he drove from the Mission Bay Hotel to the apartment complex and took the elevator to the 35th floor. The entire way, he cursed and cried and prayed that his wife did not have sex with the man before he got there. Security camera footage showed him running out of the elevator to the apartment, where he opened the door and opened fire. Inside the apartment, his wife and her friend Rayburn were sitting on the couch. He walked over to them, pulled out his gun, and shot Rayburn 3 times at close range, striking his neck, cheek, and the back of his head. His wife screamed before he turned the gun on her, shooting her at close range in the forehead. Still armed, Ali left the apartment block and picked up his daughter from school. With his daughter in the car, he told her that he had hurt her mommy. Ali then called his mother and confessed, and then phoned 911 to report the shooting. He said he'd come home to discover his wife and her friend had been shot, and that he wasn't responsible for the crime. After tracking his location via his phone, police arrested him 45 minutes later on State Route 15. I didn't believe it for a good hour. Anna's best friend, Casey Conroy, said, I heard there was a shooting in the East Village, but I was like, you don't know. Me and Anna had been talking about birthday plans in 4 days. I texted Anna immediately. She had just texted me, what are we going to do for your birthday? At the preliminary hearing, around 24 family members and friends of the 2 victims packed the San Diego County Superior Court. Several of them sobbed as details of the killings were shared. Ali pled not guilty to 2 counts of murder, as well as special circumstance allegations of multiple killings. Prosecutors may pursue the death penalty if Abulabin is convicted. The judge also issued a protective order that requires Abulabin to stay away from his daughter. Ali was seen sobbing uncontrollably as prosecutors read out the details of his crime. Later, Ali gave a garbled media interview from jail. He said that he had gotten there that day. He'd found his wife and Rayburn kissing. Rayburn's feet were on the table. It was this that made him lose it. The man in his apartment with his wife, his furniture. I felt like I was in the passenger seat of my own body, he said. What do you expect a man to do? Yet he also stated they'd already been shot when he arrived, a claim that makes no sense given his previous statement. His family said that his fame changed him. According to his cousin, he was actually a very insecure person, and social media created a fake reality for him to escape to. But it made him feel as if he was better than other people. Created a monster. Anna's best friend disagrees. Ali is just a bad guy, she says. He's selfish. There's nothing good about him. Ali's favorite fictional character was the violent mobster Tony Montana. Was it because he related to him, to his hunger for power, abuse of others, and violent rages? It seems the more Ali indulged himself in playing the character, the more he came to emulate the violent, paranoid megalomaniac he so admired. And Ali's life ostensibly ended much the same way as Tony Montana's, in carnage, violence, and tragedy. Story 6. In a bone-chilling turn of events, the tale of Sasha Samsudian unfolds. Imagine this. She returns home, the night's laughter still echoing in her memory, caught on surveillance cameras in downtown Orlando, Florida. Little did anyone know, within mere hours, she would be discovered lifeless in her own bed, her murder shrouded in mystery. But brace yourself, because the harrowing truth lurking in the shadows is more terrifying than you could ever fathom. It's a grim reminder that even in a world of electronic locks, night guards, and surveillance cameras, our safety is far from guaranteed. Meet 27-year-old Sasha Samsudian. Sasha grew up in Central Florida and soon after graduating from the University of Florida, found herself a job in Orlando as the social media manager for Pearson, an educational services firm. She was also a regular volunteer with the Apartment Association of Greater Orlando. Here is Sasha promoting apartment complexes as part of her volunteer work. Hi, I'm Sasha with 407 Apartments TV. I'm here at the Edge Orlando Apartments near UCF, so let's go check out what they have to offer. So I'm here with Kyle. Can you tell me what's the most unique thing about your community? Well, we have our 4-4 that we're going to be looking at. If you're not familiar with sunny Orlando, it's also home to over a dozen theme parks and nightlife so lively, it's earned the city a reputation as the dance floor of Central Florida. It was here that Sasha moved after graduating, working first in the marketing department of Pearson before quickly moving up the ranks to the position of director of operations. A coworker said people often underestimated Sasha because of her looks. She was a highly intelligent and driven young woman. The warm, easy manner you see on camera is also a true reflection of Sasha's character. Her friends said she was warm, bubbly, the life of the party, and full of enthusiasm. I've attended the past 2 years of Lisa-Palooza, and let me tell you, it's a great, great event. As a supplier, even on this side of the industry, I get to spend an entire day with my clients learning about their side of the business. What can be better than that? By 2015, Sasha had found herself an apartment worthy of promoting in one of her own videos. Uptown Place on North Orange Avenue had a gym, a pool, landscape gardens, and state-of-the-art security. Each apartment was fitted with a quick-set digital deadbolt lock accessible only by code. There were also surveillance cameras, entrance doors that required key fobs, and a night guard. Sasha was thrilled to have her own place and had no hesitations about living alone. After all, if there was anywhere you could rest easy in your bed at night, it was at Uptown Place. Or at least so she thought. Friday, October 16, 2015, was the last day of the Orlando City soccer season, and every soccer fan in the city was going to be out watching the game. Sasha and her friends decked themselves out in purple in support of the Orlando City Lions and headed out to watch the match. After the Lions won, the group moved to a venue called Sidebar to celebrate, and then to the Attic, a well-known Orlando dance club. Around 12:30 a.m., Sasha told her friend Anthony that she was leaving. He didn't know whether she was going home or to another bar, but that was typical of a night out. Friends would come and go, sometimes meeting up later that same evening. This, he thought, was just like any other night. The next morning, Anthony sat in a cafe where he and Sasha were meant to be having breakfast. Sasha hadn't shown up and was not answering her phone. Figuring she was hungover and sleeping it off, Anthony ate his food and left. Several hours passed with still no word from Sasha. He contacted 2 of her closest friends, Katie and Megan, who also had not heard from Sasha. Sasha had a baby shower to attend that day, and it was totally out of character for her to be unreachable this long. The 3 friends decided to swing by her apartment in the parking garage at Uptown Place. They found Sasha's car, and the gift she had bought for the baby shower was still in the back seat. After slipping through the front entrance of the complex, they banged on the door of Sasha's third-floor apartment. No one answered. A sick feeling was now kicking in. The friends rang local hospitals and police stations, thinking that maybe she had been in an accident. No one had seen a girl matching Sasha's description. Anthony called 911. When police arrived at Uptown Place that evening, they were met by the on-site security guard, Stephen Duxbury. He was off duty at the time, but knew without asking why they were there, and quickly obtained permission for them to enter Sasha's apartment. With Sasha's friends waiting outside, officers did a quick search inside. Everything was in perfect order. There were no signs of struggle, and no signs of Sasha either. Then, one of the officers took a closer look at the master bedroom. The comforter had been rolled up into an odd tube shape, and there was something else, too. Something spine-chilling. Locks of long, dark hair were coming from the end of the comforter, and on one side, a limp hand protruded. They had found Sasha Samsudian. Sasha had been violently beaten, raped, and strangled. Later, the medical examiner who performed her autopsy would report never having seen such a severe neck fracture. Sasha had fought her attacker hard. Her arms and hands were covered with defensive wounds. Just one look at the officers' faces as they came out of the apartment was enough for Sasha's friends to know that she was dead. In the coming days, their grief and anger, and that of the devastated Samsudian family, would only grow stronger with each new revelation. In the suspicious death of a 27-year-old Orlando woman, Sasha Samsudian's body was found Saturday night inside of her apartment at Uptown Place on North Orange Avenue. Right now, police are not releasing many details, but friends and neighbors say they were stunned to hear about it. Typical girl. Just a nice, fun-loving girl. She wasn't too boastful, too loud. Just a nice, quiet type. Just seemed to get along with everybody. I guess kind of nervous because we don't really know how she was killed or if we should be concerned that there's someone dangerous living in our building. An analysis of the crime scene revealed no signs of forced entry. It seemed that whoever had killed Sasha was someone she'd unwittingly welcomed into her home. Her purse, phone, and key fob for the building were missing. The apartment smelled strongly of bleach, and an examination of Sasha's body revealed that cleaning products had been poured onto her skin in what they believed was an attempt at destroying DNA evidence. The sheets on her bed also had patches of discoloration where someone had poured the cleaning product, but whoever had tried to cover their tracks had not been as thorough as they thought. The toilet seat had been left up, with 2 thumbprints found on the underside of the lid. Another was found on her nightstand. A condom wrapper had been left on the floor by the bed. Police dusted the hardwood floors throughout the apartment, revealing several size 9 shoe prints. DNA had meanwhile been retrieved from Sasha's chest. 33-year-old Stephen Duxbury had been a security guard at the Uptown Apartments for just over 5 months. Newly married, he was a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and had acquired his security guard license earlier that year. During his interview, he told police that Sasha had arrived at the entrance of Uptown Place around 1:45 a.m. the previous morning with 2 other women, but no ID and no key fob. He chuckled to himself. He was used to these sorts of situations. Drunks who had forgotten their fob keys. But the 2 young women were extremely concerned that Sasha should get in safely. He reminded them that he wasn't allowed to let anyone into the building without proof that they were a resident. When a male resident who arrived at the entrance seemed to know Sasha, he turned a blind eye when Sasha had slipped in behind him. He couldn't allow drunks to wander around the building, though. He told police he searched several floors before locating Sasha outside her apartment, trying and failing to put her code into the door's keypad. She asked him to walk with her to her car to see if her fob was inside. Exasperated at having to babysit a drunk, he relented and escorted her to the parking garage. But before they reached her car, she suddenly remembered the code once again, though it was wrong. He said he'd do a favor and leave her to keep trying while he did another sweep of the building. If she hadn't gotten it right by the time he was back, they needed to come up with an alternative arrangement. When he returned, she'd gone. He figured she must have worked out the code, but later that morning she had walked by him in the hall with a man he didn't recognize. Police now focused on corroborating Stephen's account. They needed more information on Sasha's movements that night. Uptown Place was just over a mile from the Attic nightclub, and the streets were full of CCTV cameras. CCTV footage taken from the street outside the Attic nightclub showed Sasha alone and walking unsteadily through the crowd. In footage from the next camera, she had been joined by two women. No one in Sasha's circle recognized the women. Police released the footage and issued a request for the unidentified women to come forward. Within hours, Julia Goff and Haley Messmore had contacted the police and were giving their statements. The young women explained they had noticed Sasha while they were waiting for an Uber. She was stumbling and clearly inebriated, and at some point had been about to get into a car with a group of men. Concerned for her safety, the girls approached her. They quickly realized she had no phone, no purse, and was in no state to get herself home. They invited Sasha to share their Uber with them back to her apartment. It was an act of kindness by two well-meaning strangers, but in light of the monstrous acts that would follow, their actions would come to be seen as something almost heroic. Once outside Uptown Place, the women waited with Sasha as she tried but failed to enter the building. It was then that a security guard approached and refused Sasha entry without proof of residence. But when another tenant arrived home, Sasha slipped through the door behind him. It was the last they saw of Sasha. As for the security guard, he re-entered the building a short time later, and assuming she'd be safe, they left. The women's account matched Stephen's. Meanwhile, though other leads had presented themselves, the savagery of Sasha's attack suggested it was possibly a crime of passion. Police turned their focus on to interviewing any men in Sasha's life with whom she had been romantically involved. Taylor Unsinger had been in a relationship with Sasha for 2 years. During his police interview, he said they still spoke regularly and that he had privately thought they may one day get back together. Was there any talk about trying to get back together? We didn't really talk about it, but it was something that I always thought that we would down the road. On the night of the murder, he had been working a bar shift. He said his parents had been staying with him, and he had come home and gone to bed around 1 a.m. His whereabouts were later corroborated, and he would be eliminated from the investigation when his DNA proved not to be a match of the killers. Taylor's interview had provided other useful information, however. He had once known the password to Sasha's iPad, and this new information helped the police to gain access to it. Sasha's iPad had been found at her apartment, and it shared data with her iPhone, including her messages. On the night Sasha had been murdered, several messages had been exchanged between Sasha and someone by the name of Ben. At 5:12 a.m., Sasha had sent a text message containing one word, Ben. He'd replied 16 minutes later, but she never responded. It was the last message she'd sent and the last activity that had taken place on any of her devices. A man called Ben Roebuck had already contacted the police after hearing of Sasha's murder. Police now called him in for an interview. Ben told police that he and Sasha had known each other since high school and had dated during their college years. They had been good friends ever since. He'd last seen Sasha the previous Thursday night when they had been at a bar. And you haven't seen us since Thursday night? Correct. What's the last time you spoke to her? I received a message from her at 5:12 a.m. on Saturday morning. That was are you talking about on the phone or via text message or anything? Oh, phone or text message. Yeah, text message. The last kind of back and forth we had was around 1 in the morning, but I got a message from her at 5:12 a.m. I just said my name and then I responded about 16 minutes later and I never heard back from her after that. That was Saturday morning. On the night of the murder, they'd messaged several times about potentially meeting at a friend's place. Despite the eerie last message, Ben's account of his movements also checked out and his DNA was also not a match. He was eliminated from the investigation. By now, the security footage from Uptown Place had been retrieved from an off-site security company and officers sifted through every minute of it. What they would find would horrify every resident of Uptown Place and cause the case to hit the national headlines. The footage shows Sasha entering Uptown Place at 1:46 a.m. Moments later, an unknown male appears behind her. He can be heard on the video asking her if she's all right, to which she replies with a cheerful, "Yes, thank you." She then heads up the stairs and for the next 20 minutes she is out of view of any camera. At 1:48 a.m., Stephen Duxbury re-enters, looking for Sasha. Sasha, meanwhile, can be seen stumbling up another flight of stairs. At 2:06 a.m., she is picked up on a different camera. There is the clanging of Sasha's shoes through the stairwell as she runs up the stairs, apparently to escape Steven, who she believes is going to throw her off the premises. A few seconds later, he can be seen following stealthily behind her. At 2:25 a.m., she appears again. Only this time she's walking with Steven down the flight of stairs to the first-floor parking garage, and they're chatting amicably. They exit the building before appearing again moments later at 2:27 a.m. They take the flight of stairs up to the third-floor garage and then reappear again when Sasha apparently remembers the code. This is the last footage taken of Sasha. No footage could be found of Sasha with any mystery man. At 5:05 a.m., Steven is seen entering the third-floor parking garage, then re-entering at 5:13 a.m. It seemed that the case had reached a dead end, but then officers spotted something odd. At 6:36 a.m., Steven Duxbury is captured entering the second-floor garage carrying 3 white trash bags. He re-enters the building 2 minutes later before leaving with his shoulder bag and belongings at 6:40 a.m. Police asked the building's property manager if taking out the trash was usually part of a security guard's duties. It wasn't. Steven had also told officers that his shift ended at 6 a.m. He had mentioned needing to spend a few minutes writing up a daily report, but that was unlikely to take 40 minutes. There's also a 90-minute black hole between 5:14 a.m. and 6:36 a.m., during which Steven could not be located on a single camera in the building. Police obtained a search warrant for Steven's home and asked him to come in for another interview and a polygraph test. Before administering the polygraph, the examiner asked Steven if he had ever been arrested. Steven now mentioned that he had when he was a juvenile, but it was a misunderstanding. In the following bizarre account, he explains that he was falsely accused of assault by a girl with serious emotional issues. He'd then been a true hero and pleaded guilty in order to save his best friend and the girl's reputation. He then went on to explain that he'd never been a victim of sexual assault, and that he'd never been a victim of sexual assault himself. I go up the stairs and she's following me. She was about a year or two older than I was, and, she's kind of a little nervous about what's going on, so I'm like, okay, stay here at the top of the stairs. If anyone tries to run by you, stop. She's like, okay. So I go walking around, but I can barely see anything. I'm walking. I hear pool boards creak. I see a shadow move out of the corner of my eye, turn around, outside the back of her head. She had moved and I didn't know. Okay, that's a simple mistake. Yeah, well, that simple mistake, unfortunately, went right down the worst road as possible. She freaks out, and I find out later that's because she had been raped by her 3 previous boyfriends and her uncle. So, see, she had some severe issues with that. Her mother hated my mother because her kids felt more comfortable talking to my mother than her, so she forced Becky to press charges against me. State troopers in the area basically assumed I was trying to rape her or something, and then it just went from there. Here's the accurate version. Steven had hit his best friend's older sister over the head with a shovel while she'd been babysitting him and his siblings. When she had come to, she found him choking and kissing her. He'd freaked out and fled. He was later convicted of aggravated assault. Steven's character starts to take shape the longer he talks. When asked about his medical history, he rattled off an extensive list of medical issues he claimed to have suffered from stabbing incidents, wisdom teeth removal, an emergency appendectomy, a mystery cramping disorder, kidney stone removal, whooping cough and lung issues, dizzy spells, an anxiety disorder, and migraines. He then rattled off the endless difficulties he'd suffered as a security guard, managing drunks and people determined to break the rules by swimming in the pool out of hours and picking fights. He presents himself as a morally superior but embattled enforcer of law and order, simply doing his best to fulfill the duties despite the many lowlifes attempting to thwart him. The truth, in fact, was that residents had been complaining about Steven since the moment he'd arrived. The complaints had ranged from harassment to the downright creepy. One female resident complained that Steven had been acting sketchy and had followed her back to her apartment. These complaints had been submitted to Vital Security, as well as to Uptown Place and Condominium Concepts, but no action had been taken. Steven then took his polygraph. He was asked if he had ever set foot inside Sasha's apartment, if he caused her death, or ever removed anything from Sasha's apartment. He answered no to all, and all his answers indicated deception. One question in particular he stumbled on when asked if he knew how Sasha died. He was offered up a series of possibilities when it came to whether she was choked. His answer indicated extreme levels of deception. Police had never released any information to the public about how Sasha had been killed. Based on this, there's something going on here, okay? And so, maybe she somehow talked you into coming in? Well, the chart saying that you did, this is huge. And this is, did you enter her apartment? No, I didn't. All right, well, you like that. Honestly, the situation is bothering me. About the whole thing about her. I'll be straight up, in those situations, just thinking about what may have happened. Well, without even being a polygraph examiner, you were able to show me each question you had issue with. And every single one of them on every single chart was a relevant question. So that means there's something there. There's something that you're not telling the complete truth about. You have no control over that. That's why this works so well. Now, let me show you another thing. One more thing. What's that say? Smoking reactions, not probably this result was produced by a truthful person. 0.003% chance that the result was produced by a truthful person. 0.003% chance that you were truthful on this test today. Officers now interviewed Stephen and asked him about the trash bags. He said he'd seen them on the second floor after his shift had ended and thought he would do the cleaners a favor. Here's a glimpse of the extraordinary arrogance and delusional moral superiority that is Stephen Duxbury. We were tracking her from downtown when she started to pick up guys. So, she wasn't flirting with me. Other than, leaning against me in the hallway because she could barely stand. She wasn't flirting with me. She never flirted with you? No. She never asked you to come inside the apartment? If she had asked me to come inside the apartment, I would have told her no. But this was the problem, according to what I'm looking at. I know, but I've been asked by other residents in the past too, to come into their apartments. And I've also told them no. I had one offer me sexual favors and I declined. The only person who knows that other than me is my supervisor, because we didn't want to embarrass the resident because he was drunk at the time, or possibly just lonely and maybe he can't see, I don't know. I take my job seriously, and when my job says I'm not allowed to go into someone's apartment, I don't go into someone's apartment. Yes, I've been bothered by this since the moment I saw and heard about the situation. It's been bothering me that I'm having a hard time sleeping because of this. I've been terrified of what's going to happen when I go to work tonight because I know I'm going to be having residents asking me questions. I might even have newspaper people trying to call me. Now, this whole thing is bothering me. And I knew this was going to end up happening because this is not the first time I've had police officers assume I did the worst thing. Okay, I'm not trying to get you to say anything that didn't happen. I'm just telling you the way it works. You understand what I'm saying? You didn't want anything to happen. It did not feel inside of her apartment. A lot of physical evidence. Even after she invited me to her apartment. And if we're going to continue on this line of discussion, I think we're done here. The interview concluded with an indignant and condescending lecture from Stephen, who presented himself as a morally superior but embattled enforcer of law and order. Police later found that Stephen had scratch marks up and down both arms and one mark that looked like a potential bite mark. He claimed that he had a nervous condition which caused skin irritations. A search of Stephen's apartment uncovered a pair of size 9 Skechers sneakers that matched the shoe print on the floor of Sasha's apartment. 3 days later, the thumb prints under the toilet seat were confirmed to be a match to the right thumb of Stephen Duxbury. The trash bags Stephen could be seen carrying in the surveillance footage were the same as those Sasha used in her apartment, and then the final damning evidence. His DNA was a match for that taken from Sasha's chest. The only real question that remained was how Stephen entered her apartment. An examination of Stephen's phone revealed that from 4:56 a.m. until 5:01 a.m., he'd searched for how to override a quickset digital lock, the type of lock on Sasha's door. He can be seen entering the third-floor parking garage shortly after this and re-entering at 5:13 a.m. At 5:12 a.m., Sasha had sent her last message to her ex-boyfriend Ben, simply saying his name. She'd never had a chance to write anymore. Police believe that Stephen overrode her security lock shortly after 5:13 a.m. and quietly entered Sasha's apartment while she lay in bed. He then sexually assaulted and beat her before strangling her to death. He had attempted to clean the evidence away with bleach before removing what he could in trash bags, which he placed in his car and disposed of later. The discovery that a man who'd been entrusted with protecting the residents of the building was in fact the monster they needed protection from was horrifying. How had he hidden in plain sight for so long? And was there anything that could have been done to prevent this horrific crime? Sasha's parents blamed Vital Security, the security company that employed Stephen Duxbury. Stephen had a criminal past, and other residents' complaints had been ignored. But the company argued that Duxbury had passed the state-level FBI background check. The family also filed a lawsuit against Spectrum Brands, the company which manufactured the quickset lock on Sasha's door. Criticism over flaws in the lock and the ease with which they could be manipulated had been appearing in news articles since a 2013 article in Wired magazine. Sasha, along with every individual with a quickset lock, had been dangerously vulnerable to a forced entry attack. The company, however, argued that the lock on Sasha's door was most likely faulty, but this could not be proved since it had been discarded. In January 2016, Kwikset redesigned the smart key deadbolt. Stephen Duxbury was arrested in November of 2015 and charged with first-degree murder, sexual battery, and burglary to an occupied dwelling. Orlando Police Chief John Meener called the murder a crime of opportunity by a man working in what should have been the protective service of the residents of Uptown Place apartments. This crime could have happened in any apartment complex in any city in the United States. Following a 7-day trial and just 4 hours of deliberation, Stephen Duxbury was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder of Sasha Samsudian. During their statements, Sasha's parents, Ken and Tara Samsudian, extended their sympathies to Stephen's mother. 2 sets of parents had lost their children, they said. Ken and Tara Samsudian continue to honor their daughter's legacy by working to help other families deal with the grief that comes from being a victim of violent crime. Tara Samsudian said, "It took me 18 months before I could feel any emotion about what happened, and when I started to cry, it was bucketfuls of tears that came. If you're hooked by this story, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about it. And hey, if you want to stay in the loop for more mind-blowing cases, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Stay safe out there and keep an eye out. You never know what's lurking in the shadows." As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.